Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details.
Today, I'm with Brad Loomis and Alberto Nunez, and we talk about every single little thing we ask our athletes to do for us. We originally planned for this episode to be about all the ways that an athlete can help their coach do their job better. While it definitely still serves that purpose, we ended up giving you literally every tiny detail about how 3DMJ gets information from our peeps. We discuss what we require in our applications and intake forms and how that information is secretly way more useful than most people would think. We go into the different ways we get feedback from our off-season athletes versus our in-season athletes, and then finish with the exact data we request in our spreadsheets, why we almost always require weekly videos from our clients, and the subtle nuances that we prefer in our physique check-ins and posing footage as we approach an athlete's stage date. If you're an athlete, knowing why these things are important to us will definitely help you get more from your own coach-client relationship. And if you're already a coach, hopefully this will give you some insight on how you'd like to implement some of these practices into your own business if you feel that it makes sense for you and your specific segment of clientele as well. So as usual, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head on over to 3dmusclejourney.com and leave it under podcast number 57. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Here's what 3DMJ coaches need from their athletes with Brad Loomis and Alberto Nunez. So Brad, when we first sign athletes up, what's the basic thing as a team? I know we might have subtle differences, but as a team, what are the things that we ask for up front? If you could go over that real quick.
Yeah. Well, we have an application process, right? We all have our athletes come to us through an application. They all have the standard, information on it. We're a little pickier than most, I think, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Where we ask for health history and a little bit of, family history of different things. They submit their pictures. They submit their basic training split, and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty standard. I think we all get that regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of like you, Andrea, I've kind of adopted now to where I feel like I need to talk to them now. Without that, I just sometimes feel like I'm kind of jumping into the water kind of blind, not knowing how deep the water is,
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I like to at least meet with them via telephone, Skype, whatever, for probably about 5 or 10 minutes. And then I really like some data, coming into it. Usually I'll have them at least just radio in some stuff from the last couple of weeks as far as body weight and macros, and maybe give me a little sample log. So, I think the application's the standard thing that we all do, though.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, which in itself, like I mentioned, is pretty darn comprehensive.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I don't know if anyone's curious too online, which people, I don't know if you guys also have a lot of coaches asking you how you operate sometimes. That happens to me quite a bit, especially when I'm a podcast guest. If it's someone who's just starting their coaching business, and they're always, I think, surprised by our level of detail with incoming athletes. Because you mentioned we have an application process, but if you're prepping with us, you don't even get the app unless our admin deems you in a good state to apply for prep. That's kind of off topic, but we have a pretty lengthy application process. Anyone can apply for a Skype. If you want to prep, You have to let the admin know your kind of vague plans, how far, how many months out I am, what shows I kind of want to do if you've competed before. And then she'll be like, because ours is a girl, she'll say, okay, she'll give you the password to the big application. Like you said, it is pretty extensive. Let's continue that theme with new athletes before we go into what we ask on a weekly basis. Bert, was there anything we missed with oncoming athletes?
Well, I think, like you mentioned, that it peels off a few layers so that we know who we're dealing with. Are we going to be a good fit right off the bat? And sometimes they're quite surprised as to what questions we do ask. Like some people haven't really even like fully like explicitly like thought out their goals and whether or not they're appropriate for them. Like sometimes it happens that, and it kind of just goes to show you like the I guess the sort of communication that we do expect from our athletes, because sometimes it's like, maybe this isn't the best thing for you, and it kind of just ends there, once we kind of unravel what it is that we're exactly looking for. We asked them about their history. I think that's a big one. Athletic history, I think, is a huge one, because that is definitely going to change the dynamic between you and your athlete. If this is, I don't know, maybe if they lost weight 2 years ago and now they're ready to hop on that stage, like that's probably not the sort of athlete that I'm going to be, like, I guess, coaching up in a somewhat classical way, like you see on TV, like, hey, like drop down and give me 20. Like, what was it? Like, you don't do that with that sort of person, right? So, like, I know that just from that part of the application. And then also just like the way I think they write things out kind of gives you an idea of what sort of person you're dealing with. Like, like just by seeing those really, really open-ended questions being filled out, it's like, okay, well, this is what we have here. Like, and it's not better or worse. People just communicate differently, and I think it's kind of up to us to make it a good environment, a safe environment for them to just kind of communicate in the form that they feel most comfortable doing. So based off that, I see what sort of person they're going to be, and I try to model as much as I can, anyways, the way I communicate with them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That it, like Brad mentioned, I like Skyping before we start to. But before that, the very first thing we see is the application has, like I mentioned, very standard things. Obviously, like height, weight, pictures. And then most of that health history is for our RD. Not that we don't see it too, but like we mentioned, I think 2 podcasts ago when we interviewed Steve Taylor, our RD, he kind of talked more about why he needs to know the things that he needs to know. So that gets pretty extensive, but it's still all pretty straightforward. And then the open-ended questions that you mentioned, Bert, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, I'm thinking in my head that what are your immediate, as in the next 6-month goals? What are your long-term goals? And then I think those are 2 open-ended. And then as far as like global, and then things that you would think wouldn't be so open-ended but actually end up being that way are like, we say, tell me about your training program. How are your typical nutritional habits? Stuff like that. And when you say, tell me about your training program, some people will write like 5-paragraph mini novels. Some people will say Monday chest, Tuesday legs. And I think that's what Berto's talking about, when you can see how complete this person has thought about what they're doing. And then on the flip side, you can have someone that gives you every single set, rep, number, whatever, and which, again, can tell you how detailed this person is or how much this person might be overthinking. So you can see it a couple ways. And then the same nutritionally, right? Someone will say, I eat pretty clean, except on the weekends, versus someone who gives you, for breakfast, I eat 4 egg whites, and So, like you said, there really is a lot you can tell. And not that we expect anything on their intake, it's just we kind of already start getting a feel for this person and how they operate and how much detail they pay attention to.
Usually pretty dead on too, like, like, you do this enough, what you assume from the application is basically like what you get. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. And there is a pretty fine line in this sport between, like, you can read all those details and be like, okay, this person, dots their I's, cross their T's, and then sometimes you can read them and you're like, oh no, they're they're a little bit you don't want to say, like, they're not in the healthiest place, especially because we're getting them when they're not super dieted or they shouldn't be. And you're like, oh dang. And then so I think that's like all the fields. And then Brad, you'd mentioned, or the fields in the application, and then Brad, you mentioned that you ask for a little bit of data. And by that, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of ask, and I do the same thing, a spreadsheet, which is kind of blank. It just says body weight and macros for 2 weeks or whatever, right? Like leading, because I'm trying to think, there's like a grace period in between, right? Like you get their app and you're like, okay, we're going to talk within a couple weeks. Between now and then, can you fill this out every day? Is that how that goes for you too?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes if I have the forethought, I've been even actually starting to put together their sheets in the Google Drive, and that way, as they're logging stuff, I can pop in there and kind of fill in those details like Bert was talking about, how I guess anal retentive is this person, are they typing in copious notes as to, what their body weight was, this was a body weight after eating, 80% of my calories last night or something like that,
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of times I like to just kind of hit the ground running. And a lot of times that just helps me be a little bit more accurate with our nutrition programming. Right. And I've kind of found that with that pre-start data, we can usually come right out of the gate just dropping exactly what we want,
Right.
And some people are a little bit scared that, they're not as accurate as they could be, or they, kind of don't know how to look this or that up or whatever. But that grace period there, it's like, you know what, don't worry about it. We're just getting started here. Let's just get something. It's better to have a number than no number. And then a lot of times that will kind of eliminate that fear.
Okay. Do you, I don't say prescribe because that's not the word, but do you assign macros during that period, or do you say, I just want you tracking what actually happens for 2 weeks?
Yeah, usually I don't assign macros because, a lot of times the application will say, like this one right here, it says around 2,100 calories, 130 carbs, 250 protein. And for a while there, when I copied and pasted my little template of instructions, I would type that in there. According to your application, it says you're doing this. Please track your macros and log them here in this log. And then, as we all know, usually by the time that we see it, I'm not doing that anymore. I've decided to bulk.
Yeah.
I decided to
that's a good point, especially with Skypes, right?
Yeah. So I actually just changed my verbiage just to say, track your food, and I basically just want them eating normal like they normally do, and then either tracking their macros or just tracking the calories that are in it,
Yeah.
Because that kind of tells us a lot, usually, believe it or not. Usually you'll get just how they normally eat, and over the course of 2 weeks, they're the same weight, they dropped a little bit of weight, they gained a little bit of weight, and then you can kind of make all of your calculations from there.
Yeah, for sure. That's so funny that you mentioned that. That happens a lot with what I found was with Skypes, because that waiting period's even longer, right? It might be because our waiting list, right now for off-season Skype programming is, I want to say between 4 and 8 weeks, almost year-round. Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, but usually in there. And for the listeners, usually we get their application, schedule that Skype within 4 to 6 weeks usually, and by the time we talk to them, they've already changed everything. That's like more than half the time, right?
Yeah, I would say
it's really often. And so I don't know if that comes from people wanting to impress us. I don't know if that comes from indecisiveness, which is probably exactly why they need a coach to just tell them do this and calm down. Yeah, that's really common. I forgot about that because I haven't done Skype as well.
So, like, by the way, the gender thing, you change that? I've decided to change.
That's true.
It's like we're just waiting for that one because it is like that, and you know what that tells you a lot. And I think that's what we're going to, at least with this leg of this podcast, like via the application, you can guess more or less what, especially if you've seen enough, like what we have going on the other end. Like someone who changes things all the time, they're going to be the athlete that you're like, man, I'm going to have to get this person to like just be sold on the idea that there is no like perfect optimal way of doing everything. And if it's working, we're just going to chill there because that's something you need to learn to do. And then you have the other person that's like super detailed about everything they do. You know, they 3.5 minutes in between sets, and, right?
Yeah.
And that person, that's probably going to be someone who you're going to have a hard time perhaps in getting them to maybe let's try doing it this way because they're so set. Obviously they're taking, for example, 3.5 minutes between sets because there's something that they feel is ideal about that, and it's hard to remove them from that sometimes. So, the application it tells you so much more than I think the athlete sometimes thinks they're telling you on their end.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, ours it should take it has to at least 45 minutes to an hour and a half for you to fill it out. Like it's not I want to compete. Holler back. Like it's pretty intense, but it all needs to be.
You say that, and like I know, like me, if I was filming that, it'd be like 10 minutes. Like
you would.
Yeah, it'd be like you'd be like, dude, this guy's gonna miss reports.
Well, I think too. Okay, so that's a good point. If this is my first time competing, I think that should and would take you a really long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree.
I could see it taking like 5-10 minutes. You and Jeff. Actually, probably, I guess all of us if we were to do it today.
All of us at this point, yeah.
No, probably not me, though, because of the way I do shit. Just how I roll.
It still kind of would, though. Like, you would be very good at telling me what you need to know, what I need to know. Yeah. I think that's the main difference. And that's why we would all take less time, whereas that super ambitious athlete would be like, Those were typing hands, by the way.
Berto doesn't type one hand, like he uses his whole hand per letter. I don't know if y'all saw that.
Maeve is speaking.
He's
she couldn't help me.
All right, is that enough for intake? Like, okay, as far as a new person, I guess we could talk about the Skype. We didn't really. I know you don't do that, Bert. Correct? You don't have to talk to them usually? Before?
No, I don't do that.
I think in 2013 we did a phone call, you and I, a couple months before.
Yeah. That's how we did it back then.
Yeah.
I think our back end wasn't as sophisticated as it is now. Mm-hmm. So we would go about it in that manner. Man, those cold calls were rough.
I bet. How scary.
It was I don't know. I don't think we had enough information on the other end. So all this stuff that we can kind of brace ourselves for in terms of dealing with the athlete. I don't think we had quite as much back then. So it's just like, hello, like, do you like dogs or cats? Right, let's start there. But yeah, those were the good old days.
And Brad, you said that you take maybe 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes on your first Skype just to kind of meet them and set some.
Yeah, okay. Usually just kind of to break the ice, and sometimes that tells you some important little nuggets that you would have been blindsided by sometimes as much as 5 or 10 weeks down the road. I just think they're totally worth it, and usually by that time we've seen their application. We've probably done a couple back and forth emails, and so it's not nearly as hard as those old cold calls where it'd be like, hi, it's Brad Loomis with 3DMJ, is this a good time to talk?
By the way, my buddy Brian Miner, he holds the record for the longest phone call back when we used to do it that way. It was like 90 minutes, right, Brad?
I was just about to tell you all my Skypes are at least an hour when I meet my athlete.
it's well, and I still laugh at him about that when he's like, that's not true, and I'm like, no, it's true, dude. Like Brad was like, dude, this guy is overly analytical to the point where he might be, slowing himself down. He ended up being a really chill dude, but I remember when we got Brian, I was like, whoo, here, and he ended up being that was one of those misreads on both our parts, but.
But I remember that call vividly, and it wasn't one of those calls where you were like, "Oh my God, please, stop." Yeah. It went by fairly quickly. It was actually a fairly enjoyable call, even though it was. I don't think it was quite 90 minutes, but it was like 79, 80 minutes. Yeah.
Because I know both of you well enough. I imagine a very awkward first date. Like that was.
I do a long Skype, but I think that's just my personality, I guess. I don't know. I don't want anyone to ever be like not comfortable enough to make me videos that are super telling. And that's the thing is like, because I think it's just me, I don't like purposefully get on the call and I'm like, I want an hour. I just keep talking until I feel like I'm done. Mm-hmm. And that usually ends up at least 45 minutes. Because I ask them, where do you live? How's your family? What's your environment like? What do you do for work? On your app, you said this. What did you mean by that? Like, I get real... We have a podcast, basically. Not saying that everyone has to do that, but I know that... I'm also the newest coach, too, right? So y'all used to do calls, which were usually pretty long. And so I guess if I had 10 years of coaching experience, maybe I wouldn't feel the need to, but it makes me more comfortable. So it's really not about the athlete. Well, I mean, obviously it's always about the athlete, but it's more about me feeling like I'm in a position to do what I need to do, I guess. Okay. Is that it for intake before we get into like what we ask for weekly?
Yeah. And I think I think Skype calls should be separated because obviously a lot of the information is like processed right then and there, like as we go back and forth.
Right.
And those are our athletes too. Most of my on-season athletes, I'd say 90% of them come via
the Skype program.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to tell everyone the difference between what we're talking about?
So we started the Skype program because we were trying to give priority to the athletes with a competitive deadline. And what ended up happening is that once we would get the new class of athletes that were ready to compete, they didn't take what we felt was the best approach during their off season. So things like, I have 50 pounds to lose, but I have 20 weeks to diet, so it's going to work out, right? No. So we decided to have a Skype program, which was, I guess, kind of like an off-season intervention program, and it worked out really great because you would have an athlete that at some point wants to compete, but it's not within, say, the next 10 months or something like that, and you would give them a homework packet of sorts of like, this is your training, this is your nutrition, we're going to re-Skype in 2 months, 3 months, and kind of fine-tune things until you're ready to jump off and start a prep, and then you'll be a full-on athlete. And it worked out really great in that I think it's the right amount of, especially I think for most people who do this, they're looking to change things every week, every other week, every month. When more than anything, it's about sitting on a plan for 2-3 months and then seeing how well that worked and adjusting from there. So that's kind of our Skype program. It's our off-season program, but also just for athletes who at no point, let's just say you're just a recreational bodybuilder who takes their game very seriously. It's also a program that would suit someone like that. Right. But yeah, we sit down, we Skype for an hour, we get to know you, and then we create a protocol that fits you and your goals. And then you come back and you re-Skype. Usually for me, it's every 2 to 4 months, depending on the athlete. The longer I've been with you, the longer I kind of let you just float out there on your own.
Right.
But that's our Skype program in a nutshell. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I just want to clarify for the listeners that up until Bert just talked about that, when we were talking about intake, we were talking about contest prep athletes or powerlifters getting ready to compete. So we have, the way we see it at 3DMJ, we have two routes of coaching. We have ongoing weekly coaching or the off-season Skype program that Berto just talked about. And again, there's different scenarios. In general, weekly coaching, like I said, is contest prep or meet prep. And in general, Skypes are off-season or non-competitors, or I want to compete in the next 3 years, but I know I need to get things together first, blah, blah, blah. And so with contest prep, because, as we'll talk about here soon enough, we do weekly video check-ins. That's why Berto was saying, and I know Eric and Jeff, I think, are the same, they don't always feel like they need to do a first initial Skype because they're going to see this person for 5 to 10 minutes every week for the better part of a year, if not more. And that's why Brad was saying his are really short. Don't listen to me, mine are stupid long. Okay, but then the Skype, you're basically... every time that happens, because you don't do those weekly videos, you do actually spend an hour on video with the coach. And that's where it's like you're catching up over what's happened over the last 4 months, blah, blah, blah. Because we don't, once you do your first Skype, we don't make you apply every time. Mm-hmm. So the intake forms are pretty similar, and the intake methods are pretty similar. But again, if you're prepping, it's like very often small video check-ins. And if you're Skype, it's obviously not as often. So you're on the call, we assume, and we plan for at least an hour, give or take a few minutes. And that's when, again, rather than resubmitting a full-on text application, you already know this person, you're talking to them, you're just kind of, how were the last 3 months? What did you like, what you didn't like? How's body weight, blah, blah, blah. What did we do? What happened? And where do we go from here? Are the goals still the same? Blah, 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 blah. So I think just wanted to make that different, or make that clear that when we say our Skype program, it's different than earlier when we were like, I have intake Skypes, but that's only if we want to or feel like we need it. And what else about the Skype program, the long-term off-season?
Well,
I think that's really different.
With the athlete, I like to hand over the mic to them the first 10, 15 minutes. I think one of the easier subjects for most people to talk about is themselves, and it's valuable to me. So I know where you're coming from in regards to your training history, what you've done to get here, what your goals are. And it gives me an idea of again, who they are, but I get to hear it in person. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that's very key, and it's easier said than done, I think sometimes, because it's like you turn in an application and the next thing you know, we're right here in Skype, like two strangers, like kind of getting to know each other, right? Yeah. It's just kind of like be yourself. And I think all of us coaches are quite adaptive at this point, and we've learned over the years to work with many different types of people. So sometimes like an athlete will give you what they think you want, it's like, this is not a job interview, dude. Like, you don't have to come in a suit and tie. Just be yourself, and we'll make this work around you. I think that is super, super important. Because if you're too chill, it's like, hey, we'll do something to kind of make that work to your benefit and not against you. And if you're too uptight, it's like, well, I'm gonna use your powers for good too, but at the same time, I can see how sometimes we can get in our own way as well with that situation. So the first 15 minutes, it's like, hey, athlete is talking, I'm listening, and I'm to shoot. Now next person I Skype with who heard this is going to freak out, fuck, I'm being analyzed, but it's in a good way. It just lets me know who I'm working with and how I can best help them. So I think one thing we're going to see here over and over is just both sides being very honest with each other. I think that is super, super important. But I think Skype on my part is first 15 minutes athlete talk. And just be yourself, and I will listen and try to approach your situation as best as I can based on what I've picked up from you. Yeah.
What about you, Brad?
Well, I think the only thing I would add on to that was that how handy those Skypes are for the exit process, or I guess the end of the season, kind of programming. So it's it's a lot of times I'll just, relay, look, we're going to do the same thing. It's just instead of we're doing it weekly, we're going to do it monthly, or maybe we'll do it, quarterly or something like that. And those are really, really handy, and it's a little bit cheaper. So that's always kind of nice, instead of reporting weekly for this much, now we're just going to check in monthly for this much, and I'll still get the same amount of accountability. It's just that it won't be, quite as labor intensive, and that I got to do it every week. You know what I mean?
And you're just weaning them off the reliance on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I think is very, not just handy for the coach, but I think the athletes they kind of tend to not be quite so, they find that nice middle ground, where they're not quite so, anal retentive about hitting, exactly 62.5 macro or 62.5 fat or whatever. But at the same time, they don't just go on a seafood diet, forget that they are, athletes, and just gives them just enough accountability, that they kind of find that middle ground.
Yeah. I'm trying to think too, the main thing, or like the most useful thing that we could probably use it for, and we mentioned a couple times, is that program is so ideal for someone who knows they want to compete, but is smart enough to know that just because I decided this, it probably wouldn't be good to do it this year. Mm-hmm. I think it's a fallacy that people think I need a bodybuilding coach when I'm ready to prep. Instead of like, I want to be a figure athlete. I'm in college right now, and I'd like to do it when I graduate in 2 years. Could I be set up really well? And hell yeah, you can. It makes a huge difference when someone actually has a baseline. I know, Bert, you had a great one going, and I didn't. I mean, I guess I did and I didn't. I was an athlete, but I should have waited a lot longer. So yeah, I have a couple people that are like, I want to compete in like 5 years. I'm like, awesome. Like, I'm really happy. So it's just really, really ideal.
So, I mean, here's the dealio with this podcast. It's like what we need from our athletes. I think if you're looking to compete, and you're looking to work with us, I need you to Skype with me, because I am going to inherit your situation. Otherwise, and it might not be ideal. Yeah. And we're very picky about the setup, because the setup is super important.
Yeah, I think more, half or not more, and I hate to be like gender specific, but usually females more, but I would say in general, about half the people we get, I don't know about you guys, but me so far, if they want to prep, they've already been dieting in a they're under eating a lot of the time. Yeah. So we talk about like getting people 50 over with 20 weeks, and you're like, damn it. But I'm also just as much damn it when someone's like, okay, I'm ready to prep, and I'm like, we don't have any food to take, Chrome, and you do cardio 4 times a week, so shit. I was that person too when I came to Berto. Where like I was decently lean, but I wasn't eating a lot, and I was doing cardio 4 times a week. And he was like, I need you to like almost double your carbs over the next 4 months. And I was like, it was exactly what I needed. But that's just as common a problem for people who think they're being super hardcore. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Up front.
It's like opposite problems. Like usually the guys come in too fat. And it's like, bruh, so you're going to be 140 on stage. You don't need to be 200 pounds in the off season.
And it takes a long time too to realize. Like, there's no dude at 200 pounds that thinks they're going to be 140 on stage, right? Because they're like...
Never,
Especially if they hold their fat well, and you're like, you got a lot to lose. I think people would be surprised. Like, dudes, I think they'd be surprised by how much their chest deflates. I feel like that's something that's always... I'm surprised, because obviously I'm a girl, but with the guys on my roster, I'm like, man, I thought we had those pecs. And that's like the first thing. If they store their fat well. Because in a shirt, it looks great.
And that's the thing. Usually people who lift weights, when they gain fat, it contours really nicely, So it's not until your first, like, real extreme cut that you're like, oh, shit. Like, there is really only so much muscle, actual, like, contractile tissue there. So yeah, let us guide you through that. That's one big one. If you're gonna prep, what we need you to do is to Skype so that we can ensure that you're neither one of these people.
Yeah,
Because it's an easy trap
Yeah.
to fall into. I fell into that one. I think we all have. Like me and Brad, we both been like 200 pounds because we thought it was like the appropriate thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And usually your
And,
first
you know-
meltdown of your competition season is about that time when you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have nearly what I thought I did, and I'm 8-10 weeks into this thing, and what am I going to do? It's not like I'm going to start growing those areas now.
I know, it sucks.
So,
it's the worst.
that's a terrible.
You're like, I need to
meltdown.
get leaner, but I don't have any muscles, so awesome.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
I'm fine, really. I'm fine. Yeah.
And I think, too, it's good to say that, like, we all go through that. Even now. I mean, Bert, you talked about in a vlog, you're like, not halfway, but, like, the first third of this prep, even, you were like, I don't know if I did much in the off-season. I might not want to.
Yeah, that was cringy for a minute there.
But it's just, like, I don't want to say it's just the mind games, but it's honest, right? I cannot put on any more muscle at this point, now that I'm 15 weeks into this diet. I can only get leaner. But I think the middle of prep is pretty, like that tweener, we always call it, is pretty common. It's always going to happen.
Which would be a good segue into like the actual like contest prepping and week to week coaching, because this is why we need to establish good communication early, because you will without a doubt lose your shit
multiple times.
And it's important that we develop some good communication prior to that point.
Right.
I've made the mistake where maybe we didn't develop enough of that, because I'm like, oh, this person is like cool, like they got it, and then like all of a sudden I get that report and like everything broke during like the past like 12 hours. So I think it'd be a good segue into the actual.
Well, yeah, go ahead. What do you ask of your athletes every week? Standard, without detail. Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of depends on the athlete. But I would like either a 5 to 10 minute check-in, video check-in, or they can type as much as their heart desires. I can vary with certain criteria, like how obviously the objective data is going to be the spreadsheet. But we definitely want to know, how you're doing in terms of your motivation, how high is morale, how is your energy, hormonally, how are you doing? Are you still having fun? So where are the fun levels at right now? All these other measures that are a little bit more subjective, we like the athlete to go through those on a week-to-week basis. But it could be either one. It could be like you can type it out. Like, for example, Evan Godby, he's very good at writing. So usually most of his reports, he just types those out.
Okay.
But then some people, like, and with some people, I honestly I'm like, you know what, I insisted you give me a video, because through the video I can see exactly how you're doing.
Right.
There might be certain things you're not touching on, but I can see clearly as you record this, and they change. It's funny how a person like changes from like the beginning of the prep to like then. So they go like from coach, I'm so pumped, to like 10 weeks in, they're like, yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, it's but yeah, I think both. It's a good combination of objective and subjective data. But above all, like I think a big one is like we expect honesty on both fronts. Tell us how you're actually feeling, not how you think I want you to feel. And then obviously like the numbers that you put on that spreadsheet, like those better be the actual numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which does happen, believe it or not.
Okay.
So did I miss anything at all?
No, I think those are the three big things, right? The sheet, the summary, and we'll talk about them separately, I guess, and then the physique check.
Oh, the physique check. That's
so the
right.
quickest
Don't be
thing.
filtering your pictures, yeah.
So the quickest part would be the spreadsheet. So let's knock that out. Brad, what's on your typical contest? We'll say contest prep because I feel like let's keep going with that, because the powerlifters would be all we're talking about minus a lot, and out of season or recovering would be this minus a lot. So let's say middle of prep, maybe we're less than 3 months out. What do you expect on the spreadsheet every week? On your Excel sheet.
Yeah, I mean, probably a little bit more data than at the beginning. You know, I think probably if they're more than that time frame out, we can probably get away with, you know, 4 weigh-ins per week, you know, as long as they're very consistent. There might be some negotiation as far as, you know, how accurate the macros are. You know, if they have an event, it's like, okay, we're far enough out for this one day, you know, let's just forego your macros and make sure that you hit your calorie target. And maybe it doesn't have to be super accurate to where you weighed everything out and disassembled your meal. This one time, you know, is probably fine. But yeah, once you start getting to that time frame that you just mentioned, now, yeah, I want to see weigh-ins every single day, you know, and if it is an outlier, put a note in there so I can see it, or put it in a yellow font or something, you know. Now we don't have the wiggle room, you know. We can't really get away with saying, okay, we can just kind of ballpark things and guesstimate and just track, you know. We can't do that at this point, and usually we'll kind of decide that together, you know, kind of how close we are, the physique look that we want. If we have, you know, any real digging that needs to happen. And then, you know, outside of that, you know, I love our sheets. You know, there's some people will ask, well, is it okay if I you know, report my stuff this way? And it's like, no, you know, I want it on our sheet. Our sheet has got it automatically calculates very valuable information, you know, that may seem insignificant, but it's very important to us, you know, as far as decision-making processes. You know, weekly calories and, you know, average body weight for the week, and, you know, those kind of things like that may seem trivial, and, you know, we can pull a lot from that, you know. Yeah, I mean, at that point, you know, and like Bert said, you have to be honest. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. If you're feeling, you know, dog crappy, you know, if your training is such that you don't enjoy it, you know, I mean, we're not going to just be able to fix it, but maybe we can, you know, just lessen the severity. Maybe we can make training a little bit more enjoyable, you know, things like that. And then outside of that, you know, I think probably questions are always invited, you know, but not, I like to just make it clear, you know, questions are always invited for the purposes of learning, but at the same time, don't question your plan. I mean, even if it's the perfect plan, if you start questioning your plan, you're going to sabotage yourself. It's not going to work simply because, you know, that placebo of you know, mentally making it not work. You know, either your execution is not going to be as good, just maybe subliminally you're not quite hitting your macros, even though you think you are, you know, or, you know, you're not quite getting what we want out of your training, you know, because you're not executing it to your wholehearted abilities, you know. I think those things are kind of important. People don't realize how they can sabotage themselves, not even intending to do so. Right. It's just their lack of belief in the plan, or, you know, just lack of faith.
Yeah. Good points. All good points. So to get real specific about those sheets, I'm going to just start listing off what I think all is on at least mine, and if I miss anything, y'all let me know. So we have obviously baseline, like your name, your age, your current body weight, what their approximate goal body weight is, if either you've competed before or just we kind of estimate and throw it out there. The amount of cardio we expect you to be doing. We have some supplement education section, so like you can take these, we don't force you to because we're not doctors and we can't do that. And then just a general layout of some goals that we have, right? And then for the sheets. So we have nutritional tracking, body weight tracking, and then tracking your training. And those are really general. For the nutritional or for nutrition and body weight tracking, like Brad mentioned, yeah, we want you to weigh in every day, and also that auto calculates your weekly average body weight. We ask for you to put your macros that you ate every day, and that auto calculates calories for us. And then each day throughout that, there's a little cell next to each day's entry. There's some cells that ask for what training session did you do today, how much cardio did you do today, and are there any notes for today? Like you said, if you weighed in heavy, you know that you had something in the morning and you ate 50% of your calories right before bed, kind of thing. So let us know stuff like that. Also for females, I ask them to track their periods on that if they're like if they start, just make a little note on the side, like started my cycle this day or whatever. Then for most spreadsheets right after that, there's the weight change graph, which is auto calculated too. It's not obviously necessary entirely because we can see numbers, but it's pretty handy sometimes, especially for the athlete psychologically, when they can see a jagged line, but the trend is downward over long stretches of time, right? So there's that. And then for the training, although we've mentioned tons of times, we don't switch it every day, switch it every week, switch it every cycle, but we do want you to note down and write down what exactly you did every day. So it might be for compound movements, maybe there's exact percentage-based poundage assignments or exact percents with RPE assignments, but you need to record that every day. And for accessories, it's a little more open-ended. Just give me like reps times sets times weight kind of thing. And again, it's blank and it's there, but you basically just fill it out every day as you go. That's the overview of our spreadsheets. Did I miss anything that's pretty, did I miss anything? Yeah.
No, we need it filled out. That's important.
We do need it filled out.
Yeah.
That's Bert jabbing at the people that give them without them being filled out.
As much as you can anyways, you know.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't fill it out on this day, or maybe for whatever reason, like just had to wing it, like please, like note that there. Like,
yeah.
Don't just put numbers in there that you think I would like. So.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the spreadsheet. That's the like numerical objective day. I think the next shorter of those three things would be the physique check. And we have a couple options for that. Brad, do you want to go into how you ask athletes to do that?
I think the big thing is that I just like a little bit of consistency, preferably kind of in the same spot, roughly the same time of day. So the lighting is about right, and really, to be honest with you, the physique check-ins for me, especially for my bodybuilding athletes, serve a dual purpose of not only knowing how we're, as Bert would say, progressing with fat loss, but then also I really like to coach them up on their posing, and I'll kind of pick apart their posing a little bit and say, okay, here's what we want to do, here's what we want, the changes that we want to make. And so, obviously we kind of start with the bare minimum. We start with just the symmetry poses, and a lot of times the symmetry poses are really all we need to evaluate the changes in the physique anyway. Maybe just one most muscular shot, where you're kind of flexing, and we can kind of see subtle changes in fat loss. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, that's kind of the baseline, standard that I want for everybody.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's going to be changes, sometimes you're traveling, Bert's there in a hotel room, just because you're in a hotel room, I would not, necessarily give you a hall pass for your check-in video or your physique photos or whatever, however you do that. I still want to see you, and then likewise, some people, it's like, okay, this is going to be a very long prep. Maybe this far out, we can go away with just getting physique photos every other week, or something like that, So yeah, I mean, there's obviously those are definitely not the norm. They're more the exception. I think that pretty much covers kind of what I'm looking for from those physique photos. So
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that you ask for more the closer they get to the stage, right? So when we give our first set of instructions, it usually says that like the symmetry poses are for your quarter turns, if you phrase it that way, and that can either be a real quick iPhone video, or sorry for the Android users out there, a phone video of you just doing like one set.
GEDs and no friends. Yeah.
So that could either be prop your phone up, give me front, side, back, side, and then turn it off like 30 seconds, whatever we need. Or it could be 4 photographs. But like you mentioned, Bert, you can go into the lighting, all that stuff when you talk. But so photo or video, symmetry poses. And it might even just be front and back when you really do first start. That's fine. But at the bare minimum that, then we'd graduate to like, I want the 4. Then we'd graduate, like you said, to your actual... why can't I think of it? What is it? Symmetry or conditioning? Oh my God, that's not even it.
Mandatory.
I was like, there's an M word. Okay. Your mandatory poses, which for a bodybuilder can be up to like 13, depending on your division. So, like you said, you'll get more and more as it goes. And then with the girls, especially in me, I'm like, I want the camera really far and I want you to walk through your T-walk, because walking in heels, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
And then, for girls, I want you in high heels from the start when you're doing your posing if you can. And then as it goes on, you get your actual shoes, because some girls will get their shoes right before and they're like, I can't walk in these because they've been using like 2 inches shorter heels this whole time. Posing routine right before, right? It gets to even that point. Yeah. So we just kind of, and again, it's not like we ask for it in 1 week, but just a little more week after week, the closer it gets, so that we can see any major critiques we'd like to do. And then some people, I'm like, if there's a posing clinic around, feel free. I know, Brad, you just saw, you live close to one of my athletes, and you just went to go see her, which was really nice. A few weeks ago. So.
And
go ahead.
And to kind of expand on what you said, if looking at the new categories that are out there, I like to see like my bikini athletes. I like to see them moving around, because I think for the most part, 75% of athletes that are doing the bikini class, they're pretty darn good, and sometimes they think that they need posing, clinic / help when they really don't. It's like you just need to kind of just practice things up a little bit and find your own, flair on that. But then there's that 25% that, God bless them, they're just awkward. And I like to see that. I want to be able to see, what, we need to work on this. And I think it's more than I can help you with. I think you do need to go to a few posing clinics and kind of knock that awkwardness off, Same thing with the guys. The guys sometimes
with the male physique.
Me, I'm so redneck that I look like a monkey humping a football, doing those physique poses. I really do. I would need help, and so if I was my coach, I'd be like, dude, oh man, here's my number. I think that's important, that you see them moving on those more subjective, categories where there is a little bit of how you place depending upon how you move up there and how graceful you are.
Yeah. True story. I was on Instagram 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to name names, but there is this girl that I've, I think her boyfriend might be one of our athletes. But anyways, this girl on Instagram who's a bikini athlete who looks damn incredible every time I see her. Like her physique in every photo looks spot on. And I think she had like a post where she just competed and was kind of disappointed with her placing. And it was like somewhere in like 5th to 7th or something like that. And I'm like, damn, but her physique is so good. All these poses look great. And then finally I saw a video, and I saw her walking and getting to those poses, and I was like, oh, that makes total sense. Like your walk and your setup, like even though when you get there, for bikini, even when you get there, it looks really good, but how you got there, and it was like really awkward. And I was like, oh, okay, this makes total sense. But her physique is banging. Like, it's honestly a really good. I'm like, why didn't she at least get it? I would have put her like for an average bikini show, like winning it. And then I saw her stage presentation, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. So, like you said, it can definitely. For all the hard work you put in dieting, right? If you're not just not working on it, but I find that if you don't have an objective outside person looking at you, sometimes you feel sassy. And so it feels like it looks nice, but if you get someone that you're not around, like you or your boyfriend all the time, you actually go to a clinic and someone can maybe help you out with that. I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And like Jeff experienced, he experienced the exact opposite. You know, he experienced where his posing was so top notch and it was so polished and it was so good that he actually feels like that earned him a win in a pro show, where anything less probably could have cost him a place or two. And so I think that's something that, you know, since we're talking about posing, you know, I mean, obviously, I have guys that are 15 weeks out. They're like, Coach, I only posed once this week. And I'm like, you know, that's okay. You know, we still got, you know, maybe 10 pounds to lose here. I don't know if I necessarily want you, you know, practicing your posing a lot with this look, you know, because there's going to be some things that we may have to change as you get leaner.
Good point. Yeah.
And as we get closer, okay, I need you to turn that volume switch up here now. Once a week is not going to cut it. You know, I need you to practice getting in the habit of flexing your glutes. I want you standing in line, you know, at the grocery store with your arms folded or whatever, flexing your glutes and holding them, you know. I mean, it sounds awkward, but I want that, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen competitors with glute striations that can't show it on stage. You know, they haven't practiced it enough, you know. And those are things that we need you working on, you know, in your spare time, you know, and maybe not necessarily at the gym while you've got a nice mirror there in front of you, you know. Just getting in the habit of holding your legs and holding your glutes and, you know, things like that.
Yeah. Anything else to add on your physique checks that you get, Bert? Oh, you're the lighting guy. Do that talk.
No, I'm all about the truth. You got to tell me the truth, you know. And shoot, a few years ago, I had a guy that he sent me like filtered pictures.
What?
No.
I'm like, why are you like nothing? Like your lamp has like cuts running through it in the back because like it's filtered, you know. Yeah. So I think that's important. Is like we if anything, one, lighting that starts off is not very flattering and almost bordering on disappointing. So that once you look good in that lighting, it's like, wow, like I am going to look very good on that stage.
Right.
So yeah, I think lighting is super important. The way I like to do it, if possible. I've had a few athletes this year where just because of the time of the day where they can't take pictures, we haven't been able to fit it in. But typically, I like the camera to be between you and the light source, and that seems to be the most consistent. It's not very flattering, but it tells the point. Truth. And when new details, when details start to show, like they start to show very clearly. So, and there's no weird colors like too blue, too yellow, that sort of stuff. So that's my ideal way of doing it. And then I prefer video if possible, simply because, you know, sometimes if we're just taking pictures, we can see improvement, but maybe, I don't know, as you were getting into your poses and transitioning, it's like, oh, we didn't have that like quad cut last week. It wasn't quite as pronounced. So video tells us a whole lot more. And I actually, if possible, I prefer video to pictures, and people tend to do a better job finding appropriate lighting with video as opposed to pictures.
Okay.
And as of now, you can't filter a
video.
a video, I think, right? Actually, you can, but people tend to be more honest with that one.
I never thought about that.
So yeah, Yeah, I guess I prefer video to pictures, and it's really cool that it's a lot more convenient to do that. I think my first prep when I had a coach, yeah, that would have been a lot of trouble to get that through. But like now, it's like everyone has a phone, and you can cut and copy it over to YouTube and send it over. And so yeah, I think video if possible. That's something that I insist on. Pictures if it's just not convenient.
Yeah, and then week after week after week, as consistent as possible. So even if your lighting is not optimal, if it's like 85% pretty good, but you're at least in the same place week after week, that's really handy.
And one thing too that I just thought about that I see a lot is that competitors will be pretty concerned that they take the pictures the day of their check-in. Which is obviously optimal. We would like to see them what they look like that day, but at the same time, just like I would rather have a number as opposed to no number on my sheet, it's just important that I see you, and so if it's more convenient for you to take your pictures every Wednesday night because you have less going on and your check-in is on Friday, I would rather have your photos in front of me than no photos, just because you couldn't do it Friday morning or whatever on the day of your check-in. Obviously, I wouldn't want you to submit photos on Tuesday for 1 week and then the next photos you take Wednesday for the following week. That's just not going to happen.
Whatever you can do week after week, yeah.
Exactly. At least if they're 4 or 5 days apart, I need to, especially the closer that we get, like we were talking about, I need those photos. We need to make sure that we see those transitions and make sure that you're transitioning from, your front double bicep to your front lat spread, and you're not losing your legs during that transition, or want to make sure that you're not, stumbling when you make your quarter turn to the rear or whatever, So yeah, those are the kind of the things that I like to do. It's better to have something than nothing.
Right. Good. Are we ready to go to the last part? I think this one will take a little while, but it's the last thing, I think. Our written or video summaries. I know we have the basic stuff we just went over that they could do either. I almost exclusively want videos. Everyone complies so far on my roster. There's the random thing, like if they're out of town or traveling and you just need to give me a couple paragraphs, that's fine. But 9 times out of 10, I want a video so I can see your face. Bert, talk about why that's important. I know you kind of lightly touched on it, but what about the check-in video?
Yes, body language is super important. Sometimes what you're saying is not actually what's going on. And I think sometimes it's, for some reason, like athletes have it in their mind, especially like you're really hard worker. So it's I can see where you're coming from, but you don't have to do it this way. Like if there is a time to be open and really discuss what's going on, it's like between you and your coach. So yeah, I think what ends up happening sometimes is that I will pick up on things via their video report that had they just typed that out, I would have been like, okay, this is actually what's going on. But no, sometimes like what you see is actually counters some of the things that they might be expressing in the report.
Can you give a couple examples?
Yeah, so a big one's like, I'm feeling fine. This diet is not hitting me at all. Like I am amped, and like I'm like, dude, like you look miserable, and it's taking you twice as long to get all these words out as it took you before. Or I think a big one, especially with men, is like the amount of scruff they have on their face. That kind of lets you know where they're at. Like if like the grooming kind of goes on the back burner for a bit. So, things like this. The room is a big one, I think, and I see this like in progress pictures sometimes too. It's like if we start with a really clean room and we get deep into the prep and the background just gets like worse and worse and worse. It's like
they give
you
less
kind of know
fucks.
how they're doing. Yeah, they're the struggle bus is happening a little bit more than they might lead on.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so it's just, it lets me just read other things outside of what they, and honestly sometimes they're not lying. It's just what they actually this is how they perceive it to be, but it's not always that way. And I think that's super important. It's for you as a coach to kind of be wary of those blind spots that your athlete might
I have a lot of those. I know that I do that a lot. I really try at all times to put off that I'm fine and that everything's okay and that I can take it and and then you'll see that I have like watery eyes and I'm like, no, really, it's fine. I'm good. All's good. I just got something in my eye. Also, I feel like if their physique check-in's not super noticeably different, but their face looks really different, I find that happens pretty often to me, anyways. And I'm like, okay, we look about the same as last week. And they turn on the camera and start talking. And I'm like, oh, we're looking horsey, and that's good. The horse face is good from prep.
Yeah.
But they'll lose their cheeks, or their eyes might look a little more sunken in. Which again, for prep and in the morning, sometimes I'm like, this is good. This is a good sign. If that's what we were going for.
But yeah, the video I think wins out for sure. And I think just above all, like if possible, like honesty is a great thing, and it's good to build up that sort of baseline communication, because there's going to be points maybe initially. Like I can really take what the athlete's saying into account. Be like, okay, well, I guess we can try that. You bring a good point up. Let's go with that. But later on, like I'm going to need that. I'm gonna need the athlete often to allow me to just pull the just trust me bro card, because they're not as good at I guess deciphering what's actually going on, like in their mind versus like what's actually like really going on. So it's important that we built in a really, really, a good line of communication, because eventually at some point it's going to get to the point where I might be like, you know what, dude, I'm not even hearing you right now. Like it's like, this is what we need to do, because I'm pretty sure this is what's going on, but we need to get there. I can't just throw that at an athlete without like developing that sort of trust and that very open communication line.
Yeah. I find that if we're doing weekly check-ins for, let's say, 30 weeks, the first 15 to 20, this person seems like themselves. The mood's pretty much the same. They're just telling me how it is. And those last 15, 1 week they're so excited and everything's going great. And the next week they're like, I'm a fat piece of shit. I'm not going to make it in time. I don't want to have everyone laugh at me. It's going to be a disaster. Maybe I shouldn't compete. And then the next week they're like, it's a pretty good week, so we're doing it. I'm like, what? You get a little, I don't want to say bipolar, like quadpolar. All the different personalities come out at the end of prep. And so, like you said, you kind of want to know what's going on, but at the same time, you kind of get a feel for like, okay, I know you're telling me this, but this isn't really you talking right now. It's just a weak moment because this morning's weigh-in wasn't exciting. That's hard. It's hard, but it's important. That's just another reason why the video is important. And I find too that I might need to tell an athlete, like the main source of like 6 check-ins in a row might be just to calm this person down. And some weeks when they're feeling super high, it's like, but remember, everything changes. Like it's going to be I'm glad we're having a great day. Just remember this when you're having a bad day. That you said all these great things and how excited you are, and then when they give you like a meltdown thing, you're like, remember 2 weeks ago when everything you know it's going to be fine. You were just telling me that last week. It's just a rough day because this and that. Text me in a couple days if you need anything, but I think we're going to be okay. And again, I feel like my mission is still the same across 4 check-ins, but the way I have to do that and the way that I receive information from them might be wildly different. And I think too, one of the other reasons is for the video, beyond all that, is that writing is a skill. Most people talk pretty often, most of the time through the day, they have friends, family, whatever. If your job isn't very writing intensive, some people aren't very good at writing about their feels.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, Evan, that doesn't surprise me. I've read it. I mean, you can look at him on Instagram and know he thinks and writes well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's not common, I feel like. Or I don't feel like that's very common unless, again, if you have a writer, great, as a client. But I think generally most people are used to short snippets, quick emails. Like, they're not really like, tell me how you're feeling on paper. It's not something that most people are practiced in. Any other reasons? Or things, not just reasons why we like video, but anything that we would ask?
One thing that I think that is important is in today's day and age, you're not going to be able to get away with dishonesty, or at least you're going to get caught. You're going to get busted. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And we've talked about this in other podcasts with just, social media and Insta stalking and things like that.
Yeah.
You're going to get busted. You're going to, yeah, coach, everything is great. I'm just trucking along, and then I go and look at your Instagram updates, and everything is a food picture. Yeah, training is awesome, and look at your training video, and you're training with, half of the range of motion that you were, at the beginning of your prep,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that, I used to be very, I used to insist that people would only check in with their email. I wanted all of their information in my email. I didn't want other avenues, and other ways of communication like Messenger, and
Right.
things like that. And for the most part, I do still insist on that. However, I've relaxed a little bit, in that I've gotten some good, useful information and some good relationships, I guess, that have developed off of not being quite so much of a Nazi of, if it's not in my email, I'm not even going to pay attention to it,
Right.
That's definitely a way to limit yourself too. But yeah, I mean, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to watch your Instagram story, or I'm going to hit that little 3 button up there and subscribe to your updates, and things like that. And yeah, that's gonna tell me a lot too.
Right. I know Bert was saying a few months ago that you were looking at someone on Instagram that's one of your athletes, and you're like, I definitely did not program that.
Oh, yeah.
Like just some random ass exercise that you're like, I can't remember what it was, but I remember you saying that you saw on Instagram that someone was doing like
yeah.
It was probably extra glute work. I think it's some of these gals just need to go to USAPL Nationals and see the glutes on the chicks that are
lift the
progressive
heavies
with the basic movements.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
It's like,
yeah, or even just an Olympic lifting meet, I mean,
yeah.
You have gorgeous round butts that everybody is doing all of the band work and the single leg thingy and the kickbacks and the blah blahs, they're doing all that to get what they've already got,
Yeah.
I think that specific one that you're talking about, Andrew, was actually a power lifter.
A power lifter, I think, doing
he was doing
the
something
pit shark
that Bert was why?
Yeah. It was whatever. But yeah, especially for a power lifter, right? Come on. Anyways, so that is a good point. Of course, we prefer video because it's usually more candid and more telling. But at the same time, if it's not aligning with what you're publicly putting out there, which is very more common than you'd think.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone tells you they're loving everything that we're doing, but then they're sharing posts from other people doing something that's not even remotely what we talked about, then you're like, oh, you secretly want this thing? Okay, and when someone tells you, it's pretty common to me that I'm really in this as an athlete, I want a career in this, blah 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 blah, but their Instagram says, oh, you actually want very quick sexualized Insta fame, versus what we've talked about multiple times in check-ins. Yeah.
That's a big one, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I think we see our athletes as an extension of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And yeah, I love it when our athletes, especially with social media being such a big thing now, when they are good representatives of what we stand for.
Right.
So I think that's one thing we love it when our athletes rep right.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely something. It's like the honor part of it, right? It's we line up well with certain things.
Yeah. There's also, I didn't think about too, sometimes there's some form checks. Like, we don't ask for those, especially with non-powerlifters. I don't ask, like, if we've been lifting for a couple years and I give you a sheet that has certain movements on it, I assume that you can do these movements. But sometimes I'll look at an Instagram post and I'm like, we need to talk about your traps on your bench, or we need to talk about your squat stance or whatever. And not in a shitty way, but like, hey, why don't you try this little thing here and there that I wouldn't have noticed if I didn't follow them on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And something else that we didn't talk about that is worth noting is like our pre, I guess not pre, but the paperwork that they have to sign. Obviously with the health forms and the release agreements and things like that. That's always going to happen with pretty much every athlete. More extensive with a competition prep athlete than with like a Skype athlete. But I think an important distinction that we have. That maybe not very many coaches have is we've got that code of ethics, and what brought this to my forefront, it was when Bert was talking about repping, not only us, but then the sport as well. We do pretty much insist that you, first of all, sign that code of ethics. But yeah, I mean, and that's pretty common for a lot of sports. I mean, when we first brought this up, people were kind of a little bit taken aback by it.
Right.
But I mean, almost all sports. I mean, shoot, my son has to sign a code of ethics for Pop Warner football that you'll, display good sportsmanship and that you'll conduct yourself professionally. And parents too. Parents have to sign this same little jobber that says you are not going to behave like a friggin' 2-year-old when your son or daughter doesn't get the ball, or coach takes them out or whatever,
Yeah, we do the same with gymnastics. There's like a thick ass parent handbook, and the athlete and the parents have to sign it. Yeah. We do that. Important. And ours is short. It's like a 1-pager, but again, it's just
it makes you think about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We expect you to be a natural bodybuilder on our natural bodybuilding team is the first one, right? That would be important. And if that changes, we probably need to know that so we can find you other people to work with. Yeah, I mean, what else is on there besides what you said? Like good sportsmanship.
Well, yeah, and just conducting yourself like a professional.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it says, but yeah, I mean, basically conduct yourself in a manner that people, I mean, I don't necessarily want to do this, but it's like, oh, that's not a bad sport. That person is not an anal retentive meathead that looks in the mirrors all the time and is, looking down at people at the end of their nose of, I don't approve of this or that, just that you're a professional. You go to your gym, you do your training, you mind your P's and Q's, and you're not out there, making yourself look better than you are, or whatever. You just you want to represent your sport in a good way and not give it that bad image that was so prevalent way back when.
Yeah, and I think Bert said it best, right? When you say, I'm a Team 3DMJ athlete, I remember the first time I said that, and I was so proud. I put it everywhere. But just, we love our athletes to do that as long as we don't look at the things you're doing and wish you didn't have Team 3DMJ athlete in your profile. That's it. I think that's a good way to do it. Like when your coach sees it, that we're not like, oh, don't claim us. You know?
That's probably the best way to put it, you know. And sometimes I'll see, you know, former athletes that will put something up, and I'll be like, and I'll go to their little homepage. And I'm like, oh, thank God it doesn't say Team 3DMJ, you know. And the same thing happens on the other side. You know, somebody will put out just something that's like, wow, I wish I could double like that, you know. Yeah. And sure enough, it still says Team 3DMJ, and you're like, oh, thank goodness, you know. That's a good feeling, you know, when you see that. It gives me that dad-like pride, you know.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we went over, I feel like, all the things that we would ask of our athletes to start throughout the process. Very specifically, did we miss anything? Do we think we're good?
No, I think this would be, a fantastic podcast for a potential future athlete to listen to.
For sure.
And
other coaches too. Like until the podcast, or I mean, 2015, end of 2015, I came on. And although I went through it as an athlete, it changed a lot in those 2 years what we expect to get. Again, like I was saying, me and Bert had the phone call. So there's just, it's going to be evolving. I'm sure we'll probably have to redo this podcast in a couple of years of what we expect now after things that we've learned. But this is taken, if you're a new coach, I don't know if you necessarily need to be as detailed as we are, but I think it's a good, I don't know, pick the things that you need for your athletes in there, because maybe you're Gen Pop, you don't need all of this, but hope it helps.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, guys. I think we're done. Talk to y'all next week. Hi, 3DMJers. Just wanted to remind everyone to head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and sign up for our Big 3 newsletter. We call it this because, in case you haven't noticed, our team comes up with 3 new pieces of content every week in the form of 2 articles and 1 podcast episode. Rather than remembering to check back with us 3 times a week, we can send it all to you in one single email every Thursday. This weekly digest also includes direct links to any other content that Team 3DMJ coaches are a part of throughout the entirety of the internet. Whether that's guest appearances, interviews, seminars, or courses, you will not miss any of it. So if you like hearing about all the free resources that we have to offer, all the products we sell, all the projects we are a part of, and all the ways you can get discounts, reminders, and early access to them, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com right now and sign up.